Good evening. If you would, grab a Bible. Let's turn to Proverbs chapter 16. Proverbs 16. Marshall, that was awesome. That was awesome. Marshall officially is a much better song leader with his offhand than I am with all my hands. That was great. You did a great job tonight. I appreciate you, playing through the pain on that one. So we appreciate your work. Good to see you tonight. Looking forward to what we're going to talk about for a few minutes. I want to present some ideas to you tonight that I hope will just be a starter for you to think in some different directions and do some self-examination. And so we're not going to pursue all of these thoughts to their ultimate ends, but I want to point you in some directions that I think will be relevant to the question that we're going to ask, as you'll see in just a moment. Proverbs 16 and verse 18. Proverbs 16:18 says, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." The Bible warns repeatedly about the dangers of pride. Matt read for us this text in Luke 18:14 after Jesus talks about the Pharisee and the tax collector, where Jesus says, "Everyone who exalts himself will be humble, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted." I want you to think about that idea. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Here, if you exalt yourself, you will be humbled. There is a threat there. There is a warning. In 1 Peter 5, in this passage, this is repeated a number of times in the New Testament. "Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you." And I want you to think especially about the first part of that idea. God opposes the proud. God fights them. God is against them. God will take them down. If you are exalting yourself, you will be humbled. If you are proud, it will go before your destruction. I think we really like this teaching. We kind of say, yeah, go get them, God. You get those proud people, until we consider that maybe we're the ones who he's addressing. Maybe we're the ones who have a problem with pride. You see, when you start thinking that way, it makes us sober rather than happy. It gets us a little quieter and more introspective. So my question for us tonight is just, what does pride look like? And I got this guy who looks kind of smug, so I thought that would be a good visual aid for us. What does pride look like? And then how can we fight it? When you talk about pride, this is one of those challenging things to identify, because pride is not really something you do. Very often we can do the same things and have a humble attitude or have a proud attitude. And so even when we look at each other, we don't know if someone is proud. It may be that something they say may point at it, but usually pride is a heart condition. It is an attitude rather than an action. So that to me says that we need some help identifying it, both in others and in ourselves, because we don't want to be the ones who are going to be destroyed or humbled or who are going to be opposed by God. I've also been asked to talk about this because our ladies are starting this week a study of humility. And so they said, can you talk about humility and pride and kind of introduce the idea for us? So I want us to think in this way and start to think about how we can reprogram our hearts so that when things like these attitudes come up, when thoughts like these arise, we know, I've got a pride problem. This needs work. So let's talk in this way. What does pride look like? First, pride looks like self-focus, which is the idea that I am great. I want you to go with me to Daniel chapter 4. Daniel 4. I want to show you a couple of examples of this that are, let's just say, a little egregious, and then we'll talk about how we might not go quite so far as these two, but we can still struggle with self-focus and thinking that we're great. Daniel chapter 4, and we're kind of jumping in the middle of the story. I want to start reading in verse 28 of Daniel 4, where we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar and how Nebuchadnezzar is humiliated. It says in verse 28, "All this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. And the king answered and said, 'Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty?'" Wow, what a statement, huh? He just looks around and says, man, I am awesome. Look at all this stuff I did. I sure am great. And all of it says that I am great for my majesty. Verse 31, "While the words were still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven, 'O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has departed from you, and you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and you shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you until you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. You're going to be, we call it humiliated or humbled. You're going to be brought down. Remember, he who exalts himself will be humbled. Remember, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And that literally happens with Nebuchadnezzar. He is going to be destroyed. He is going to fall until he knows that this is not his doing, that you are not as great as you think. So in Nebuchadnezzar's mind, Babylon is merely a mirror through which he can see his own greatness. And everything that happens in Babylon, he says, I can pat myself on the back even harder. Look at what I have done. Everything comes back to him. And here pride goes before destruction. You can see how everything focuses on the self. I sure am great. And you can also see how that almost seems to attract God to say, I've got to strike this man down. This is not right. I can't have people acting like this with the blessings I give them. The Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and he gives it to whom he chooses. Nebuchadnezzar is too focused on himself. Let's go to Luke chapter 12. The other example I want to show you is here in Luke 12. Luke chapter 12. You'll notice that he sounds a lot like Nebuchadnezzar, but just with a smaller kingdom over which he's ruling. Luke 12 and verse 16, it says, he told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. So you can see this is another man who has a self problem, an I problem. Look at all my stuff. And then he says to himself, notice he doesn't even have anybody to talk to. He can only talk to himself. And so he says, hey, soul, what do you think? What should we do, soul? I know what I'll do, soul. I'll build more barns so I can have more stuff, so I can celebrate. I can put my feet up. Verse 21. So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. God says, this night, your soul is required. Whose will these things be? And so it is for the one who is not rich toward God. He thinks that what he has is just merely his own greatness, is there to enrich himself. It's all about him. Now, let me caution you about something. We have just read 2 examples that are egregious. People who say things that you and I would probably never say. Man, I sure am great. Look at all this stuff. Just because we are not Nebuchadnezzar does not mean we don't battle pride. These are extreme examples to indicate a point. So have you ever thought, look at what I have achieved. Look at my family. Look at my money. Look at my career. Look at my body. Look at what people say about me. Or as the old song says, do you ever just say, I did it my way? Think about it. What are we saying when we think those thoughts? We are saying, I'm great. Occasionally, this works the flip side way too. I want to caution you about this because some of us don't sit around thinking I'm great. Some of us self-focus by sitting around and thinking I'm terrible. I'm the worst. I'm horrible. I'm awful. Nobody likes me. And yet I want you to see even that is the same kind of self-focus. It is turned in on me where I'm the most important thing. And so I want us to see this is a pride issue. Paul says this, Romans 12:3, for by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure that God has assigned. Think soberly, think rightly. So when you think about this, self-focus, the answer is, first, gratitude. That what I have was given to me. Nebuchadnezzar was given a kingdom. The rich man, the rich fool, was given all of these things. Now, they both had to work, surely. They did work. But at the end of the day, They needed to return thanks to God. We have received so much from God. When we start to think this is about me, it's time to get on our knees and thank God for what he has given. Paul says, what do you have that you did not receive? Think about it. What do you have that you did not receive? And the other part in answering self-focus is that there are lots of other people in the world besides us. And so there is a focus that needs to turn toward other people. Paul says, let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. What do other people need? How can I help them? Is it possible that the things I've been given are intended to bless them and not just to bless me? Is it possible that I can do for others? That is a pride-defeating thought. Second, pride looks like comparison, which says not I'm great, but I'm better. I look around at other people and I say, well, at least I'm not that guy. Matthew chapter 18 is where I want to go. Matthew 18. Matthew 18, we're going to read these first 4 verses. It says, Matthew 18:1, at that time the disciples came to Jesus saying, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them and said, truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Notice their question in verse 1, who is the greatest? Not who is great. That would be the first one, right? Who is the greatest? It's a comparison question. Jesus, rate us, evaluate us, and tell us who's number one, who's the best. And we know that the apostles argued about this incessantly. Regularly, they would argue, which I just wish I could be a fly on the wall to figure out how those arguments went. Was it just a lot of, I'm better, I'm better? I don't know. But this is the comparison problem. Jesus says, you have missed it. And he calls a child to him and says, this is the greatest. And unless you turn and become like a child, you won't enter the kingdom. Humility means not comparing ourselves with everybody else, like that little child. I want you to think about this style of pride with me for a moment, where we look at other people to feel better about us, and we look down on others. Matt read this for us tonight, Luke 18:11. God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I mean, he has a specific man in mind. At least I'm not that guy. Think about that. He feels that his sense of rightness before God is in comparison to someone else. And that's a problem. The Pharisees are like this. The Pharisees saw this, that Jesus ate with tax collectors. They said to his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? See, we don't do that. We're better than them. We keep away from them. In fact, at one occasion where Jesus is there with a Pharisee and the woman who is a sinner comes and is wiping his feet. It says when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. I mean, why would you let a sinner touch you? You hear the difference, though. She's a sinner, I'm not. She's a sinner, she shouldn't touch me. She shouldn't be near me. And so I look at her and I say, well, I'm not a sinner. That's what a sinner looks like. Isaiah 65, I know this is a long text, but I want you to bear with me because this is powerful. God says, I spread out my hands all the day to a rebellious people who walk in a way that's not good, following their own devices. A people who provoke me to my face continually, sacrificing in gardens, making offerings on bricks, who sit in tombs and spend the night in secret places, who eat pig's flesh and broth of tainted meat is in their vessels. So these are all things that under the law of Moses were violations of cleanness rules. So they do all these things, and then they say, keep to yourself, do not come near me, for I am too holy for you. He says, these are a smoke in my nostrils, a fire that burns all the day. So somehow, even though they are thoroughly wicked, they find someone else to say, oh no, you need to keep away from me. I'm holier than thou. And God says, you're smoke in my nostrils. It is infuriating to God. This is what it looks like to be a people consumed by comparison. So let me give you some indications that we might feel this way. When you have the pride of comparison, you enjoy seeing other people cut down or rejected or failing. See, when others succeed, we take it personally. We feel jealous because we feel like we deserve their promotion, or we deserve their respect, or we deserve the attention they're getting. And so it bothers us because, after all, we're always in competition with them. We want to win. We want to keep our distance from other people because that makes us feel better about ourselves. Now, there's a lot of things we could say about an antidote to this. I just want to present you with some probing questions. Can you just spell this out in your own heart? There are people that probably we compare ourselves to so that we feel better. We feel better than them, specifically. But are we really better? Like, what does that even mean? Better in one area? Better in one arena of life? Or do we think we are better human beings? Do we think we are perfect where they are not? Are we really finding things to prop up our own sense of self? Finding some way to feel better? And then, really, does it matter? The thing about comparisons, the thing about competitions, is that we're always acting like there's a scoreboard somewhere where somebody's keeping track. And, when we're doing something a little better than someone else, we get more points on the board. And someday, the board will be presented to everyone. I just want to remind you, there's no scoreboard. We're not competing with other people. Comparisons are merely vehicles for pride. What does pride look like? Third, it looks like exemption. The idea that I am different from others. Matthew 26 is where I want to go. Matthew 26. Exemption says that there might be rules, but they don't really apply to me. There might be warnings, but they're not really talking about me. You see, I'm just a little bit different from everybody else. And those kinds of things, they don't really apply to me the same way they might apply to the regular Joe. Matthew 26 and verse 31. It says, "Then Jesus said to them, 'You will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee.' Peter answered him, 'Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away.' Jesus said to him, 'Truly I tell you, this very night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, 'Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you.' And all the disciples said the same." Not me, Jesus. I love how Peter throws all of the other disciples under the bus. Did you hear it? Though they all fall away, I will not fall away. And you can make all the prophecies you want, Jesus, but you're thinking about the wrong guy, not me. I'm different. This is not the only time Peter thinks this way. You remember later on, we're going to read this week in our Bible reading as a church. Jesus says, "Peter, do you love me more than these?" Peter is the one who will say, "Oh no, Jesus, you'll never wash my feet. I mean, yeah, you can wash these other jokers' feet, but my feet, you're not going to do that to me. I'm different." I want you to think about how often this spirit can come up. As I thought about this biblically, this one jumped into my mind. Luke 3, verses 8 and 9, where John the Baptist comes giving warnings about how God is going to judge. And he says, "Bear fruits in keeping with repentance, and do not begin to say to yourselves, 'We have Abraham as our father.'" Think about that. They were saying, "John, yeah, I know we need to repent and all that, but look, God's not going to judge us. Think about who we are. We are Abraham's descendants. We're just a little bit different. Yeah, you need to get after some of these people, but we are different." And he says, "I tell you, God is able from these stones to raise up children for Abraham. Even now the axe is laid to the root of the trees. Every tree, therefore, that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire." John says, "I'm not having any of that. Don't think God's going to grade you on a curve and that you're going to somehow be different from others. There's another place where Jesus talks about the parable of the vine dressers and that the kingdom is going to be taken from the Jewish nation and given to others. And some in the audience, this is in Luke's account, some in the audience say, surely not. That would never happen. You're way off. See, not to us. We are different. This is the type of thinking that says, other people may need to hear the truth. Other people may need to change. God may be unhappy with some people, but not me. I'm fine. This is the kind of thinking that listens to a sermon and says, boy, I sure hope somebody else is listening. We might even turn around and see, are you listening? But we don't listen. I'm somehow different. This is the kind of thinking that says other people may make big mistakes with their lives, but I won't. That other people may get caught when they do wrong things, but I won't. That other people may get addicted and it may be their fault, but I won't. That other people may get wrapped up in sin, but I won't. Never me. Paul says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. In other words, God's made the world so that the rules apply to everybody. That when a man sows something, he reaps that thing. And that when you try to reap something different from what you've sown, you are attempting to mock God. Thinking that we are different would be that kind of mocking. So the answer to this style of pride is the simple remembrance that I am human just like the rest of the world. It seems to me that this may even be a pride that tends to crop up more among the young who think that, the warnings that they hear and the teachings that they hear are really about other people and they don't seem to be as true of me. But that as we go through life and we experience some of those disappointments and those mistakes ourselves, we begin to see, oh, this was talking about me too. But remembering that we are human and that God's word is for us too will help us with the exemption problem. The last area I want to look at is the idea of certainty. That is the assumption that I am correct. Let's look in John chapter 7. John chapter 7. I want to look at a couple examples here of people who had this pride, who refused to consider that they might not be right. They were certain, and yet they were certainly wrong. John 7 and verse 45. It says, when everyone is in discussion about who Jesus is, and they attempt to arrest him. John 7:45, it says, the officers then came to the chief priests and Pharisees, who said to them, why did you not bring him? The officers answered, no one ever spoke like this man. The Pharisees answered them, have you also been deceived? Have any of the authorities or the Pharisees believed in him? But this crowd that does not know the law is accursed. Nicodemus, who had gone to him before and who was one of them, said to them, does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does? They replied, are you from Galilee too? Search and see that no prophet arises from Galilee. I hope you hear their tone. Are you deceived? Here are guys that are just sort of the foot soldiers, and they come back and say, man, this guy was amazing. And they say, oh, are you deceived too? Have any of the Pharisees or the rulers believed in him? Or is it just you regular people? You people that don't know anything. This crowd that does not know the law is accursed. Those are strong words. They are saying, we're the ones who do the spiritual reasoning around here, and you need to listen to us. But we're surely not going to listen to you or these cursed people. Now here's Nicodemus, who, by the way, when they say, have any of the Pharisees believed in him or the rulers, Nicodemus is kind of shrinking into the corner, kind of. And then Nicodemus does speak up. He's like, hey, wait a minute, guys. We're not supposed to judge somebody without hearing them. And then they turn on Nicodemus. Oh, really? Are you believing in him now? You want to be his disciple too? Are you from Galilee too? And then they utter this absolutely ridiculous statement that no prophet has risen from Galilee, which is not true. I hope you hear the tone. It's the tone that's the problem. It's the tone of pride that says, I'm right and everybody else is wrong. If I need to call you accursed, I will. If I need to threaten you because, hey, nobody believes that garbage, you're all on your own, then I will. And if I need to get in your face, I will. But what I won't do is consider whether I might be wrong. That is pride. Turn the page to chapter 9 of John. John 9. This is one of my favorite stories in all of the Bible, where the man who was born blind is healed by Jesus, and then he gets called in for questioning over and over again by the Sanhedrin. In John 9 and verse 30, it says, the man answered, why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he, Jesus, comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, you were born in utter sin, and would you teach us? And they cast him out. So the blind man lectures the teachers, and he is right. Every point is right. And do you hear their tone? First, it's ad hominem. They attack him. You were born in utter sin. They're referring to the fact that he was born blind. That was not his fault. Jesus makes that clear earlier in the chapter. And yet they accuse him of having some kind of spiritual warpedness. And then they say, are you teaching us? Who do you think you are? But did you notice they don't try to combat his argument? They don't consider it. It's not as if they say, well, let's go point by point through what you've argued. They don't even consider that they might be wrong. They have made up their minds. They are certain. And I want you to see how there can be pride in that certainty. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I am not saying that when we come to a conclusion about something God has said, that it's wrong for us to feel like that conclusion is solid. There are things that are true and that we believe. But I want to remind us that there is always a possibility that we may be wrong in how we have understood something or how we have tried to apply something. And if we refuse to consider that, then we are proud. Because we are assuming that we, of all the people in the world, of all the people in history, we have got it all right. We're the ones. We figured it out. We got all the answers right. Not sure exactly how that goes, but we did it. And so there's no reason to reconsider. We're just going to go with what we've decided. So surely, there is more than simple pride to this spirit. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of trying to talk to someone who was absolutely convinced that they were right and refused to hear any opposing view. I don't know if you've had the experience. I'm sure you have, maybe talking to your spouse. But there are times where you can just see in their eyes. They're not really considering. They're not really listening. They're not open. And I believe there is danger in that style of pride. The danger we see in John 7 and John 9. How can anyone break through that facade if we are not willing to consider whether we are truly correct? So we have to be the people who are willing to consider, who are willing to humble ourselves, who are willing to listen, to hear new perspectives, and to then test all things and hold fast what's good. James says, therefore put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. Receive with meekness the implanted word. Receive it as if it has the authority to teach you, which it does. Receive it and say, that's true, even if it means I've been wrong in the past. Receive it and bow to it and submit to it. Receive with meekness the implanted word. Who or what has the power to convince you that you're wrong? Is there anyone? Is there anything? Now, the answer to this style of pride, as I've mentioned, may just start with the admission that I may be wrong. That yes, I believe this is true, or I believe this is right, or I believe I did the right thing, but I'm open to the possibility that I may have done wrong. I may have understood wrong, and I may need to change. So who do I receive with meekness? That's the question that this style of pride leaves us asking. I told you I would give you some areas. We haven't plumbed the depths of any of these. I want you to take these thoughts and take them into your daily living and your daily thinking and chew on whether some of these might show up. Humility shows up in how we think about ourselves and how we think about others and how we think about God. But that's also where pride shows up. Can I give you one more thought before we're done? As I looked at this list, it occurred to me that all four of these attitudes can also be present in churches. Churches can be groups of people who believe that they're great, who believe that they're better than other groups, who believe that they're different, as in the rules of what happens in humanity don't apply to their group, and who believe they're correct without ever considering whether something they have done or taught could be incorrect. So humility and pride is not just a personal battle there either, is it? It's also something that we have to pursue and that we have to watch out for in our corporate life as a group. But this is going to be something. Humility and pride concerns are not something that we just grow past and leave behind. We just constantly reevaluate and continue to pursue humility. Working on, do I think I'm great? Working on, do I think I'm better? Working on, do I think I'm different? Working on, am I certain, without truly considering the possibilities that I'm wrong? I appreciate your attention tonight, and I hope that the study that our ladies are going to have will be a profitable one as they pursue humility. They are not the only ones who are going to be studying and needing to study on humility and pride. We all need to be thinking about these things. And so I encourage you to be thinking about these in the days to come. Might be someone here tonight who needs to obey the gospel. This is an opportunity that we give to anyone who's present in our assembly, just because if your heart is touched and stirred up by the word of God and you're ready to take a step toward him tonight, to be baptized into Christ, to have us pray with you about some problem in your life, if there's anything that you need from us,